The irony of asking women to recognize when they're being abused, but then hoping that if something happens, they go, what do we do? I'm so sorry.
Calling back to Reese Witherspoon.
Exactly. So exactly at what point are we supposed to have agency and understand what's going on around us? And also, people also wonder why the good guy is such a difficult thing. Well, maybe perhaps because you are writing good guy characters as people who are taking advantage of these women, mayhaps. So maybe we're living in fear because even when you are good, apparently it's only for your own pleasure. Hey!
Welcome.
Hi, guys.
Hey. Welcome to Girlies Nights Podcast Season 3.
Episode 9.
Hope you enjoyed our last episode.
With Skylar.
Yeah.
I'm back. Did you guys miss me? Please
we
say
missed her a
yes.
lot.
You guys referenced me a few times.
Yeah,
I was honestly,
we couldn't stop talking about you
I
when
was
you were
incredibly
gone.
honored. And you guys haven't seen the substance, so
We're going to watch it literally as soon as possible.
big L. Big L.
Okay. Today.
Yes. Okay. Sorry. We got to get back on topic because this one is a little bit more serious. We're going to be a little.
This one's a serious trope talk.
Yes. We're talking, and welcome back to Trope Talk. Callie, take us away. What are we talking about today?
Today we're talking about the Born Sexy Yesterday trope. And so I'm just going to jump into it because I reference where it comes from in my notes.
And this is probably going to be a big combo.
This is kind of a big convo. There's a couple points of contention and controversialness that come up in this conversation. But I think that because of the nature of the trope and what it perpetuates, it kind of ends up being controversial no matter what. And honestly, at the end of the day, it's all just opinion.
Yes, we are. Yeah, we're just people
This is
with
our opinion,
our own experiences.
and our own experiences. I think that the nature of opinion is that it's not right or wrong. It's simply opinion. Remember, you're allowed to have your opinion. I'm allowed to have mine, and they're allowed to be different. Just, I ask that if you have a strong opinion, you have to be able to back it up.
And that's what we're here to do today.
Yeah, we're backing up ours today.
I'm an opinionated person, and I back it up because
She did
very
research.
embarrassing when you or have a strong opinion and people go, so why do you think that way? And you just go, because
Not today.
not today.
We all have an opinion on this, and we're going to tell you why.
So I've mentioned in prior episodes that I love science fiction. In theory, one of the common tropes in this genre is the Born Sexy Yesterday. The term was coined by pop culture detective back in 2017 and has since garnered a lot of conversation surrounding the male fantasy this trope feeds into and possible attempts to subvert it. I think science fiction, especially film, has been catered to a very male perspective, and this trope definitely contributes to my own disappointments within the genre. The Born Sexy Yesterday is a character that is profoundly naive and remarkably intelligent, effectively giving a person with the mind of a child but the body of an adult. We see examples of this in Tron, The Fifth Element, but also in a lot of older work like the OG Star Trek and Forbidden Planet from the 50s. She is often science fictionized into the story because she's an alien, a robot, or some other version of someone who is a fish out of water to like life. And she's forced to look to the male main character, or MMC, for guidance in both the plot and ultimately love. She plays into the power fantasy of insecure men who feel inadequate when measured up to other men. If she's untouched and has no experiences outside of him, then she will never expect him to grow and change, nor will she find aspects of him inadequate.
Which are already just how embarrassing. You know what I mean? How embarrassing that you have to create a character that the biggest part about them is that you can take advantage of them, and they just want their protagonist to be congratulated for their inadequacies. And
it's Pop Culture Detective really brings this up, and I'm going to link the video down below because I think that he goes way more in depth than I think I'm going to go in this podcast episode, where I'm kind of touching on a lot of different things. And it really does feed into that, like, you as the men reversed of this are very much like, they're just guys. They have this power. It's definitely a power thing. There's a power
100%
fantasy
an
here.
unbalanced relationship. Absolutely.
Where he is in charge of her. He controls her. he like morphs her into the perfect like sexy version of a girlfriend that he wants. And I think the big part here is that there's no challenge to him. She's not going to come at him with personal growth, or she's not going to ask him to not be pervy, or like to be less lazy, or like whatever other thing that a woman may ask of a man.
Yes,
in a relationship.
It is really deeply rooted in their like insecurities, so evolving around sex and feeling like they're enough.
Yeah, like they don't feel like they measure up to other men. So if she's never experienced other men, then they will never be inadequate in her eyes.
Which is, once again, disappointing that they're using women to compete against each other. Once again, we're the victim of their exploitations.
And it just be with someone that doesn't have any opinions of their own, or like any knowledge of the world on their own. So they're going to agree with you. You know, they're going to be, they're learning through you or the male character. So,
I find this is very relevant with Elon Musk's adventures recently, when he's like making girlfriend robots. I saw something about that online. And I think that this ties in a little bit to that idea of like an AI girlfriend or a girlfriend robot, similar to Companion, what we talked about episodes ago.
Yeah, the first one of the season.
And yeah, and it was just like this idea of like having a partner that is just all sexy and completely looks to you for everything.
And complacent, yeah.
Like she doesn't challenge you at all. And it goes even deeper into PDF files, but I think that there's also this less pervy aspect of it that's more like insecurity and inadequacy. In my dive into this trope, I was reminded of this Reese Witherspoon quote I saw floating around on the internet. I'm going to paraphrase a little bit, but in she's giving a speech, and she's referencing a pivotal moment in so many action films where the FMC turns to our male lead and says, "What do we do?"
Oh, yes.
She calls this out in the speech.
Oh, I love this.
Saying that essentially, when does a woman not know what to do? When is a woman not problem solving? In a sense, I find a similarity in this almost inflated sense of responsibility insecure men place on their shoulders. By this, I mean, for example, I have had exes that are emasculated by being wrong or overshadowed when put up against me in certain regards. Like, this isn't meant to inflate me. It's like if I challenge them on a problem-solving aspect, or if I would like just get a fact correct, they were emasculated by my intelligence, or by my when I express a moment of intelligence, they'll be like, they feel emasculated by it. I think a lot of men find a sort of masculinity in being the most intelligent in the room or the leader of any situation. So if a woman presents her own agency, it has the potential to overshadow him. And I do have to say that I think that this idea of masculinity is rooted in misogyny. Intelligence and leadership are not inherently masculine, but we've defined masculinity by them, basing them like on society. Society standards have defined masculinity by intelligence and leadership. And I think that this trope perpetuates that. These men have to be the most intelligent and the best leaders, because the girl is literally the mind of a child. She's profoundly naive.
And I think not even just in this trope, but that's kind of a thing that in a lot of different aspects comes, where it's like men kind of like childish like women, you know, like in characters and anime, and
this is a huge thing in anime.
And let's be very plain here. The reason we're talking about this is because the infantilization of these very sexy women that they are creating directly correlates to sexualizing children. Like, this is just very bluntly exactly that, and it's wrong. And I think that, I don't know, as a society, there's been like, you know, there's like hints of that that we've allowed to pass.
I think it plays a little bit into like the profoundly naive and like unimaginably wise quote from the pop culture detective video
from Tron.
Like, it's a different way of basically saying when a guy goes up to a very young girl and calls her mature for her age.
I wrote that down because it's the first thing that I thought was that. Yeah. And how many times have you been told that, Bella?
Oh my gosh.
Well, as a child.
Oh my gosh. As like, when I was a young teenager, I looked a lot older than I was. And so I was definitely a victim to that a lot. Like, so many guys that were much older than me would say that, or, you know, had crushes on me, but then we're like, but you're too young, but I want you. And it's like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And they're using that as some way to bridge, some way to make a connection, that some way to actually justify them finding you attractive, which is just disgusting and inappropriate.
It is. And it's interesting too, because it's always like you're mature for your age, and they're like, it could be 19 or 20-year-old woman and like a 30-year-old man. The amount of life you have between those 2 years is so much. I will never not find that age gap creepy.
Not at all. And I don't think either that when they're implying mature for your age, they're mostly probably implying
Physically mature.
yes, exactly.
A little bit physically mature. And I also think it's partially manipulation, complementary to tactic. I've known a lot of women in my life that when they get called mature as a teenager, they take it as a compliment. They're like, I'm just so grown up. I'm so mature. And it's like, I think I've met so many women in my life that just want to grow up.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I couldn't relate to this. I was always like, I don't want to grow up. If I grow up, I'll die. Like, I would have an existential crisis when thinking about growing up. But I knew so many women, especially because I grew up in a religious like environment.
Upbringing, yeah.
A lot of women were like, I just want to grow up. I want to get married. I want to have kids.
Yeah.
And it's like when an older man would call her mature, she would be like so complimented by it. I'm so mature. I'm so grown up. I'm so emotionally stable. And it's like these girls I'm speaking of, I have people in mind. They are not mature.
It also makes
They never were emotionally mature.
It's to manipulate them in a way to where then they think they're mature, and it's like, yeah, this is
Yeah.
gross, but it's only because I'm mature. He's not a pedophile.
Yeah, he's
It's
not
just
weird
because
and old.
It's just because I'm so mature.
And I was one of those people who wanted to grow up because I felt
Yeah.
like getting that freedom to make your own decisions, that was the most exciting part about that. And exactly when a man compliments the maturity of your intellect, that means that you believe that your decision making is
sound.
when it's really not, and they're just grooming you.
Yep.
There is instances like not everybody and this is only when you're an adult. This is not when you're a teenager. But like there are instances where there can be a 40-year-old man that is so incredibly immature, and there can be an 80-year-old woman that's so incredibly immature. Age doesn't really have a factor in my brain. Like when you're saying that, like that doesn't, it's more about how, as long as they're an adult.
Yeah.
Like the Born Sexy Yesterday thing is very much like they physically are mature, but mentally they're like have the brain of a child.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
they're so naive. In The Fifth Element, she cannot speak full sentences. She speaks like a toddler.
And he laughs at her for it. This is the other thing, as you were talking about how men always would get offended when you were intelligent, because it's intimidating and incredible, and they want to be the smartest in the room, but they also want to be the funniest in the room. And although a lot of these characters would rather be taken more seriously, like when we reference Tron and The Fifth Element and everything, they're action heroes, but also they would just laugh at these women's naivety.
Yeah.
They'd laugh at their ignorance. And I think that also just like kind of poked at the fact that they were villains deep down, you know, which is just crazy because there is nothing funny about that. There's nothing funny about a grown adult seeking help and you laughing at her for it.
Yeah.
Because she has no other. Yeah. She has absolutely no other option. This is like one of the other big things is that I think later we'll talk about Poor Things, but there's always a note is that they always try to keep these characters as naive as possible, but then they always try to educate them in the things that aid them. Like, for example,
I will bring up some stuff about this.
Yes. Okay, please go ahead.
Later on.
Noted.
But I have here that in the pop culture detective video, he also touches on the male like inverse of this trope. So I don't risk like
Yes.
copying his video like verbatim. I'm not going to go too much into that. But I'm going to leave that argument to him. He does a great job talking about it in that video, I think. So I would say go to his video for a good group of gender swapped examples, because we're not going to dive too much into that for time's sake on this video. The Born Sexy Yesterday trope, I think, is a major deterrent for me in watching science fiction stories. Women are often underrepresented in these stories already, so watching the only woman on screen be nothing more than a naive, unbelievably attractive person, it ruins my viewing experience. As per the pop culture video, he also mentions that there's always a scene where she strips down to change, clearly not understanding her sexual body. It's played for comedy, but the more egregious examples have a man coercing the Born Sexy Yesterday woman into kissing him.
Yes.
Lying about the implications of doing so. There's a clip from Star Trek, where he tells the alien woman that kissing is helping. So they kiss and she asks him to continue helping her so that they might kiss more. This isn't the only example either. This trope, it's also in Forbidden Planet. He is explaining kissing to her and they're lying about what kissing is and what kissing does and like what these women are consenting to. It completely takes away their informed consent. So this trope is also usually followed by a pervy scene where the MMC teaches the Born Sexy Yesterday about kissing and or love and sex in some instances. The implications here hinting at her childlike mindset and experiences in life while her still being a fully realized woman.
Which is so exceptionally frustrating because how oftentimes are we told that we are not supposed to recognize our own attractiveness?
Yeah.
And yet these women don't recognize their own attractiveness because they were just born and they have no idea what their bodies are doing. And you described it as like...
They're unaware of their sexual body and the nature of their body. Like when they strip down naked, they are unaware of how attractive that can be for a straight man.
And that is so frustrating because we are not allowed to recognize that because then we are vain and we are pushed, like we're not allowed to have the power in that to do what we want with our sexuality. Yet, yeah, they love when we're ignorant to it, but they want us to be as sexy as possible. And so many of these examples, these men were not just, they were absolutely manipulative, but they were leaning in. They were grabbing their face. They were initiating everything. So before she could even recognize her sexuality, these men were preying upon it.
And I feel like the only example of this happening in real life, I mean, I'm sure it does for like head trauma victims or something like that, but is teenage girls like changing in front, like you go from the point of being a kid and being able to like not have your shirt on and change in front of men because it's like you're a kid, and then there gets to a point where you do that and then you're scolded, and so it's weird that that's kind of blent in with the fantasy of the
exactly bit. Like as soon as you recognize your own body and what it can do is that's when you get consequences, but they want to take advantage of it as long as you're naive to it.
It reminds me of those street interviews where they take a picture of some of you and say, what do you rate yourself? They ask you what you rate yourself. And there's these very confident women to say, I'm a 10 out of 10. And then they'll take pictures of them and show them to men and be like, what do you rank her? And it's like, they'll have these men saying 6, 7. Like they'll always degrade them. And then the comments will make fun of the girl calling herself a 10. And it's not that she says she's a 10 because she's confident. And there's this like confidence that gets misconstrued with vanity in women. So bringing up what you're talking about, how like women aren't allowed to recognize their own bodies and their own beauty. I think that it falls into that. Like if a woman is looking at herself in a mirror, she's considered vain. Whereas if you're looking at a woman who is just sitting there being beautiful, she is unaware of her beauty.
But then she also has to do everything to be classically attractive.
Yeah,
like
she can't know she's attractive, put into that.
But she has to do her makeup and her hair every day. She has to go to the gym. She has to like
eat
wear certain clothes and everything where you're hyper fixated on the way you look, except you can't be actually fixated on it.
It falls into the cool girl thing from Gone Girl, where it's talking about like she's cool, she's a size 2 and she eats whatever she wants. She's always funny. She doesn't mind your dick jokes. She'll suck you off. Like there's all these different implications that this falls kind of underneath.
And these hoops that we have to jump through are just unrealistic to the moon. And the fact that they want these crazy sexy bodies, but nothing behind our eyes because they only want our bodies to exist for them. They can't even be ours at the end of the day.
The other side of what I just talked about was the informed consent when it comes to kissing and then like newer movies, it will probably even go deeper. It goes deeper into like, and it's like one of those things where if she is from a planet or she's a robot and she doesn't know what kissing is and she doesn't know what sex is, and you're teaching her what those things are, that the only thing that can represent is teaching a child how to have sex with you, which is 100% just PDF file behavior. There is no other way to read into that.
Yes. And there was he also referenced in the video, the pop culture detective, correct? Yes. He also referenced in his video how the only time when it is okay for these people to for someone to educate on is when they're both naive to the fact.
Yeah.
That is when it's
they're
okay
both
for you
learning.
both to go on this
Absolutely.
exploration. If there is an insane power dynamic there, it is just uncomfortable.
Like there
Well,
has to be an equal
13-year-old
exchange.
boys and
So
13-year-old
inappropriate.
girls are totally allowed to explore those kind of things with
Because
each
that's
other.
something
Like,
that they both do.
Together.
they're figuring it out. Yeah.
Yeah.
but to take grasp of that is just not okay.
Mm-hmm.
I have here that she bears a lot of similarities to the manic pixie dream girl and the bimbo. The MPDG is chaotic and has a childlike wonder in her approach to the world and all of its struggle, teaching a jaded man how to love life. Born Sexy Yesterday has this wonder and chaos, so she must look to our MMC for how the world works. Each degrades the female love interest into nothing more than a vessel for male fantasies. That and the PDF file implications. Similarly, the bimbo isn't born yesterday. She's just a bit stupid.
Yeah. I was linking
this
that
is
together.
Marilyn Monroe plays the bimbo a lot.
And not that children or like innocent people are stupid, but it does kind of feel like that links. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like you want her to be mentally slower than the man. Because like I said, I think that there's this like societal definition of masculinity rooted in power and intelligence.
Yes.
Which, like I said before, intelligence and power are not inherently masculine. I think that masculinity has simply been defined by them.
Yes.
So the bimbo, she leans on men around her to guide her, and inevitably the MMC has to protect her from other men trying to take advantage of her. He's good and the other men are bad. I find that this further perpetuates the idea that the onus of judging a man's character is on women, especially when they end up in abusive and or toxic relationships. Women are blamed for not figuring out their boyfriend was bad before dating him. It's her fault for dating a bad man, not his fault for being bad. This goes further with victim blaming in cases of SA. In this trope, MMC is one of these good men, and he's just had poor luck in love, no fault of his own, and this Born Sexy Yesterday is almost like a prize for his supposed goodness. Ironically, this relationship just takes advantage of the FMC, which opposes his supposed goodness.
Yeah.
The irony of asking women to recognize when they're being abused, but then hoping that if something happens, they go, what do we do? I'm so sorry.
Calling
but
back to Reese Witherspoon.
Exactly. So exactly at what point are we supposed to have agency and understand what's going on around us? And also, people also wonder why the good guy is such a difficult thing. Well, maybe perhaps because you're writing men, you are writing good guy characters as people who are taking advantage of these women, mayhaps. So maybe we're living in fear because even when you are good, apparently it's only for your own pleasure.
Yeah.
You're manipulating us.
I think it just dives into that mental gymnastics that when we talk about victim blaming, I think a little bit, because it's like, you're supposed to recognize when that man was bad. Like you should be able to avoid the R words on the street because they're bad. They're all over the place. You just have to recognize them. You have to spot them. They're the evil guys in the hoodies hiding in dark corners. When it's like, no, usually the bad man is a family member, a friend, someone you've trusted, your partner. And it's like, it's not your fault. It's not your fault if he is bad or he abuses you or does something to you. It is his fault. And this trope is like, good thing that the man was good. Good thing that MMC wasn't a pervy abuser, but he does take advantage of her.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But he does a few nice things for her. He
Yeah.
does the bare minimum of like, I don't know.
Taking care of her.
protect-
He gives her a
Texting her.
fork when she's eating. Like,
Yeah, genuinely. And I don't know, we're sitting here and we're talking about this trope because it's so harmful and it's upsetting. And if you're a guy out there who's saying, I'm different, I'm a good guy, you should be mad about this trope as well. You should be disappointed in it, and you should also not support it.
I think, yeah, just like I've said a little bit earlier, was like, I love science fiction and concept. And I think that this really does deter from my own science fiction, like, enjoyment. Is like, I never really find stories that I relate to or like. I just think, well, that was kind of cool. And then I move on. And I don't like think about it very much.
Yeah.
And I think that in science fiction, women are very underrepresented. And we're seeing, like, with fantasy and romantasy, women are finally getting represented in that regard. But I think that that hasn't transitioned to science fiction much. And I think that this trope is very, very pervasive. And it's all over the place because science fiction is used as a tool to make her childlike.
Yes, exactly. And as well, and alien. Like they actually make these women alien to try to kind of create some distance.
So not only is she dumb, she's also exotic.
Yeah. Ooh.
The strong female
I've
character
gone
trope, I feel like, kind of is like a kind of fu to this trope. It feels
bit.
like it's switching that, where she's good no matter what. She's super smart. Like she's super intelligent. She's better than everybody.
I kind of see that. Yeah. Interesting connection. Cool. And then what I was going to say about the exoticism a little bit of the alien, this trope, he talks about it in the Pop Culture Detective video, originates from colonizers and them like discovering indigenous women in like their exploration of the world. But it originates from like even that trope. And this trope is a version of that where it's a white man, it's a John Smith discovering his Pocahontas.
I was going to say Pocahontas.
Yeah. And like that is, I think, a big part of where this trope comes from. In a lot of the movies we've referenced, all the characters are white because that's Hollywood. But I do think that, but there still is movies out there that have this trope, where it's like a white man discovering indigenous women, and that
showing them the world,
racist and sexist.
Yeah.
Anyway.
And I think, I don't know, thinking back on this overall, I think they're also creating these women that could never healthily exist in reality.
Yeah. Okay, so this is where I'm going to get a little more controversial.
Yay, spice it up.
One film that tries to subvert this is Poor Things. I found that this movie didn't go far enough in its condemnation of the actions of Dr. Godwin and the other men. It focuses heavily on Bella's sexual maturation, even painting her first sexual experience with a man as the thing that brings her life into Technicolor. It properly condemns the men in the Born Sexy Yesterday trope through Mark Ruffalo's character. However, it fails to dive into the nuances of Bella's relationship with her abuse, and also, Bella has no body hair besides a perfectly manicured bush. This movie sexualizes her in the attempt to subvert her sexualization, but by doing so, it simply perpetuates the standard. There's this fantastic video by Final Girl Digital that dives into this topic more in depth. And I could probably do a whole episode just talking about how I don't think Poor Things subverts the tropes it thinks it does. But I highly recommend her video because she basically says everything that I agree with. I'll link it as well.
I like Poor Things in that it brought the attention to it. Like people started talking about it and they weren't really before.
And I think that was what Yorgos's vision was for the film, was that he's trying to subvert it. And he literally directly took a child's brain and put it in a grown woman's body. Like, I don't know how much more blunt you can get with that.
Yeah, but, and it's based on a book too.
But I really enjoyed the film when I first watched it. But yeah, I have now, my perspective on it has changed quite a bit. And although, like you get to see how, she's incredibly naive, and you do get to see like there is at some point like the villain in the movie, the guy who takes advantage of her. I mean, he ends up with a goat's brain. So there's that. But
she gets a little bit of a revenge. But
yeah, the problem with this is that she exists as like a spectacle in the film. And also, unfortunately, Yorgos makes her a spectacle to the audience as well, which so in turn it just allows us to prey on her too. And I can also argue that participating in the trope, like, although he had the best intentions behind it, creating another movie that, like I said, participates in the trope as well, you can argue that it might even be healthier if the movie just didn't exist at all, than trying and hoping that it would push back against it.
And one thing that really stood out to me is that the movie changes the book's ending.
Yes,
the book ends where we realize that the book's been told by a male perspective the entire time.
Love that.
So it gives us this extra perspective on the story that everything in the story is completely unreliable, because it isn't Bella's perspective. It's I think it's the man that like came in to study under Dr. Godwin ends up being the writer of the book.
The apprentice.
And so I think that changing that ending completely takes away from the story a little bit. And I found the movie gross. And the problem is a lot of the stuff that like is gross in the movie, the only people who find it gross are the people who already recognize that it is gross. If somebody is going into this movie and already sexualizes children, they're not gonna watch this movie and see like, that's gross to do. They're
Maybe
just
I should
gonna
have done that.
they're just gonna sexualize Bella Baxter. They're not, it's perpetuating it because they're not subverting anything at that point.
And I wish that they had made Mark Ruffalo's character more of a villain. I think the whole point was that it was supposed to be correct, right? That you can recognize that. But he also made him a laughingstock. I was supposed to be kind of a funny movie, and I think that added some, I don't know, depth, it made the movie really interesting. But if he had been entirely completely vile and people were absolutely disgusted with him at the end of the movie, I think I would have felt more satisfied because people could have easier recognized that villainry rather than, I don't know, some guys walked away and were like, wow, I loved Mark Ruffalo's character. He was so funny, instead of him being a manipulator and groomer.
And I think that like if you recognize all the signs of a manipulator and groomer, you do see that. Like I didn't think Mark Ruffalo was funny at all. But I think
love Mark Ruffalo. Just putting
Mark
that out there, I love
as an actor, but I didn't think his character was that. But I think that like in this instance, it's easy to, it doesn't go far enough, I think. And also it tries to explore this idea of a woman acting without shame. But there's a lot of other reasons why women are not sexually liberated. Pregnancy and STDs being two very huge reasons why women are not, spreading their legs for everybody. And like the other thing too is like, women being sexually liberated doesn't also mean that she's having sex with every man she meets.
No.
Or wanting to be a whore even. And I think that like Bella Baxter's naivete leads her to being a whore. But it's like, I think that there's just like, being sexually liberated doesn't mean having a lot of sex. It's giving like girl boss feminism the way a man would think a woman is sexually liberated, not actual sexual liberation. Because accepting your body and your desires is very different than having sex with every man who's walking around. Yeah. Like that just sounds like a male fantasy at that point.
Putting on a show for him,
And I think that, like I said, I could argue that maybe it would have been more helpful if he didn't make the movie and didn't like contribute to another male gaze fantasy. But, he did try.
I think they should have brought a woman writer. The only woman involved in making that film was Emma Stone, but she was just a producer. So she probably didn't have a lot of creative control over like the script and the direction of the film. And also
there were very few female characters, also very few of those. Mm-hmm. And I think, like you said, he tries really hard to create a sexually liberated character, but at the end of the movie, she doesn't even recognize or condemn her mistreatment at all. She identifies her sense of self deeply rooted in her sexuality, but then at the end of, unfortunately, that sense of sexuality was actually only formed in transactional relationships. And she never at all talks about that. She never at all talks about her relationship.
She never confronts her abuse.
Not at all.
Obviously, everybody like is going to have a different relationship with their abuse.
Yes.
And she doesn't have to like accept it for what it is if she's not ready for that. But I think that like it brushes off a lot of the abuses Bella goes through for like this revenge plot.
Mm-hmm. And she has so much character development, but it would have been nice to see that, yes, like instead of her identifying her sexuality with just sleeping with whoever she likes and this interesting journey that she went on with Duncan and being a prostitute and et cetera, but instead I wish that she would have finished that arc recognizing the damage that was done and how to have a healthier version of it. And also, I
don't know. The video by Final Girl Digital goes way more in depth into these ideas. We're paraphrasing a lot of her ideas.
Yes. And if you haven't seen the movie, this is probably confusing.
Yeah. So I think that like we're going to move on from...
Sorry. I will leave it with this because I said that like, thank you, Yorgos, for trying, but also, I don't know. But I saw this review on Vulture and it was by Angelica Jade Bastian. And she says that, end quote, in many ways, the film demonstrates the limits of the modern cis male auteur's vision for and about women. So like what we said, he should have brought more women on. And this is kind of the only, he's limited because of who he is. So maybe it's not his story.
But we bring this movie up because it's meant to be a subversion of this trope.
It's also one of the most modern.
Mm-hmm. And I think too, this trope was coined as a phrase in 2017. This trope is not even 10 years old. This trope is too young to like consent. So I think that we're already exploring how to how to subvert it. So I think that it just needs a little bit more time in its subversion attempts.
And you talked earlier about the sci-fi genre and how it exists so much there. And I think it's like you said, we're finally women are like brought into the fantasy genre. I think that as more women come into the like are recognized in the science fiction genre, I think we'll be able to like more critiques.
I think that as time goes on, we are making strides. I mean, there's lots of people who are taking us back, but there also are strides being made.
Yes.
And so I think that I want to also comment on Poor Things is I don't think it does it well. I don't think it does what it's trying to do, but it is still trying to make a stride.
It's trying.
Which is, that's a good thing.
We'll get there. I don't think that the first one should be from a male director or in a male writing team. I just don't think
this one's going to be from a male director.
I think that this is such a woman experience that I would have a hard time believing that a cisgendered man could ever understand or try to.
Yeah, and I think he tries to understand it, and I think he's an intelligent director.
Yes.
But like I said, there's just some shortcomings that happen because of his own perspective of the world and his own experience of the world, which is okay. Like, we all have our own experiences, and we all have our own shortcomings based on our experiences in the world.
There's so many stories that are that I could not tell. That it's not my place to tell. And if I tried to, I would be. I wouldn't know how to.
I wouldn't do it well. Yeah.
Like, just a rule of thumb, if there's like you said, like a trope that involves someone being taken advantage of, if you're going to make that movie, don't take advantage of them in the movie as well. It's already happened. Try to like see it from a very literal, realistic, sad perspective that it is.
And I think that part of the reason it doesn't do it well is because of the amount of Bella's sexualization. I think if her world comes into Technicolor when she like doesn't not when she has sex with a man, like when she reads a book for the first time, or does something else.
Like masturbates and has the big O with herself, and but she never she just explores, but she never completes until she's with him. So it's like, she thinks that's what incites her to go on her journey, is because she thinks that she needs this man to reach. I don't know, maybe. I don't know.
Which is very uncommon. Like, very uncommon.
Yeah, which is how you know a cis man wrote this. But yeah, go see the movie. Have your thoughts on it. But yeah, it was just a little... Missed the point just a tad.
Yeah. And this is partially related to Poor Things. What you were saying about the brain of a child, like, procedure, it's very similar to a lobotomy.
Lobotomy, totally.
Not only all of that, but this film for Poor Things, and more so the trope sort of fetishizes lobotomies, where the victims were more often than not women, and a lot of times women in abusive relationships. Abusive relationships. The procedure severs the brain's frontal lobe, inhibiting the patient's ability to make decisions on their own, thus literally taking away her agency, rendering her a ghost in her own body. This trope showcases a disturbing male need to control his female partner. Dr. Godwin gives adult Bella a child's brain without her consent, and the MMC, alongside the Born Sexy Yesterday, constantly breaches her consent by misinforming her of his intent. She is a sexy, childlike woman with all the capacity of a partner lobotomized.
Yeah, totally. I've never thought about it like that, but it does feel similar to that, and that's a very real life scenario.
That's a very real life, like, we're talking about, like, this woman can't exist. They tried to make her exist by giving her a lobotomy. And I guess I know people joke about lobotomies now, because if you're mentally ill, you just live, laugh, lobotomy. And for people who don't know how it works, trigger warning, I'm about to explain how they do it. They lift your eyelid and they put a long needle and they hammer it into your eye, up into your skull, and they sever your brain's connection. Like, it literally turns you brain dead. Like, brain dead. And then they pull it out. And a few movies that explore lobotomies that I thought were cool was I forgot the name of it, but the one where the girl goes on a very long video game adventure.
I have no idea.
A long video game. This sounds fun.
It's about Ready Player One. It's a very weird movie. She's like, it's this blonde girl who's fighting a lot, but it's like as her brain is like crumbling, we're watching her like fight different villains.
Oh my goodness. Have you seen this movie?
Yeah. It's not very well made, but it is like exploring lobotomies, and it's one of the only ones I can think of that actually explores lobotomies.
Yeah. And they would give lobotomies to men as well. It was
more often,
but it was for men. It would be because they were mentally ill. With women, it would be like
she would be hysterical.
Yeah, because she'd be
sucker punch. Yeah,
sucker punch. Yeah,
and I think we didn't really go over it because Callie referenced the video, but like just very quickly, like the female inversion of this trope, it would be that we would just not find like like you said, there are male lobotomies, but I think what's different is that there could always be exceptions, but I just don't believe that a lot of women find naive men attractive. So there's not that sexual, I don't know, like that sexual danger involved. If your male character is lobotomized.
And I think there's a paternal side of this trope because it's a child and an adult kind of idea. But yeah, there's a more maternal instinct of taking care of this man. And it's like what is the pop culture video? He like says something like, when women do not find adolescent like inadequate men attractive.
No.
Love
so
that. Yeah.
they're not gonna fetishize I think I've met most of the women I've met would not date a teenage boy because why would you ever want to be in the same room as a teenage boy?
And they tend to find them attractive after they've reached maturity.
This trope perpetuates a creepy male fantasy and still continues to pop up in modern media, as we've stated. Again, I recommend the video by Pop Culture Detective as it describes this trope in a more literal and definitive way. I've found this thing very fascinating ever since I saw that video, and even before I even saw it, 'cause you kind of notice it, you just don't have any like the words for it.
Yeah, I never watched The Fifth Element because every scene clip I saw was of the lead woman in the film, and I was very grossed out at every single because she was a child. And
I think there's this overly male-centered attitude in cinema, and while we're starting to get better representation, there is still plenty of young male filmmakers who are finding clever ways to pretend they're an ally, as we've experienced in our own schooling experience and in the indie industry. With our current political climate, I also think it's important to continue to call out misogynistic behavior and to continue holding men to a higher standard than the bare minimum. Real women are not born sexy yesterday, and relationships are meant to be an equal exchange, not a balance of power.
Yeah.
Period. Yeah. And I understand what it's like to want to be more than adequate. I understand in some way why they're writing these characters, because they want to feel on top of the world and the best of the best.
And I would raise you, if you want to feel like you're good at something, practice.
Be good at something. Yes.
Do the internal work. I think that you have to do personal internal work in order to be a better person. You can't just sit around and mope and talk about how bad of a person you are. You have to do the work.
And take advantage of others to feel better about
yourself.
yourself.
Part of being a human, I think.
There was one example, just really quick. I was watching Fallout, and almost immediately I was like, it feels a little Born Sexy Yesterday. She's super naive. She's going out into the world when she's been underground for her whole life. And so she's very like, almost like a puppy, like,
yep.
What? Oh my gosh. Yeah. And
another modern example.
I remember like seeing that, and so many guys had a crush on her. It was Ella Poppel. What is her name? Ellen Poppel.
Oh no.
She was Jinx's voice actor too. I can't believe I'm forgetting her name, but
LP.
But so I was like, gosh, where is this going to go? You know, because I'm like, there must be a romance. But she ended up getting with someone that was very similar, which I was like,
naive as well.
Yeah. I was like, because he was also naive. He was in the military or whatever, never done anything.
So there you go. If you're looking for examples where
if you want to do kind of that thing, I mean, she wasn't hypersexualized, so just don't do that. Then you can tell innocent stories or like people that are.
There's a place for naivety.
And there's a place for the fish out of water story, because this really does stem from like, she's a fish out of water.
Yeah.
And like I said at the very beginning of this, I was like, she's a fish out of water to like life, because she's like a child. But I think that you can tell a fish out of water story where the characters sort of, they each provide something to each other. Because like I said, a relationship is an equal exchange. I talked about this last season a little bit, as I think that like in order for like it to be a healthy romantic relationship, there has to be some give and take on both ends. You have to balance each other out. You have weaknesses, your partner's going to have weaknesses. And as long as you can grow in those weaknesses together and meet you where you are and grow together, I think it'll be a much more solid romantic relationship. And everybody craves that love, you know? Everybody, aromantic and ace people aren't going to be in that bar. They have a different version of it. But I think that there's this very human need to be loved. And you see that in this trope a little bit, that these men, they want to be loved and they want to be in these relationships with women. And I think that exploring why you maybe want to have power over your partner, why do you need to be in control? And like that goes into that self-work a little bit. And I think that like I said, it's important to sort of talk about these sort of ideas of like misogyny and racism when we talk about the colonialism side of things in our media, because our current political climate is so masculine and it's just a bunch of loser men in power right now. And I think that like being able to not idolize being a loser and recognizing who you are, where you come from, and respecting your partner for who they are, and recognizing that you aren't perfect and neither is your partner, and that's what makes it a beautiful relationship, is a big like life lesson I guess you can take from these types of stories.
Yeah,
because it goes back to the enemies to lovers thing we talked about with that power imbalance. I've been seeing it a lot in romanticies as well. I don't like watching a relationship where there's a massive power imbalance. I don't want a 500-year-old man who's been waiting for a 19-year-old girl. I don't want that. And I think that we as the audience should demand more of our creators, and that we don't want the tropification of our books. We don't want the tropification of our science fiction. We want good stories and we want healthy representations of romance, because in a political climate like our current one, the thing that is going to keep people sane is art.
Yeah, and I think like the best movies and films are a reflection of reality to a certain extent, and so it also goes the other way, where it's like if you're making these movies, how do you think about women? Like you should think about, like you're saying, you should focus on healthy relationships and how you can and hopefully change.
Yeah. I think this is one of the reasons we started the podcast, because there's so much power in filmwomen, so just be careful with that power.
Yeah.
And write instead movies like what Callie just told you all about. Women were not born sexy yesterday, so if you are at all attracted to that, check yourself.
Yeah.
But I've got to go. So
yeah, we've got to go.
We have got to go.
We got to go watch some movies.
Thanks for listening, guys. Some well-written movies.
Thanks
for listening, guys.
Thanks for being here.
I hope you took something from this. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening. Okay.
Yeah.
See you next time.
See you next time.
Bye. See you next week.